He sat with the name field for 23 minutes. This was not unusual for Kai. He was the kind of person who had spent 3 weeks naming Pathline, not because the name mattered more than the product, but because names were a kind of commitment, a staking of ground. Once you named something, you could no longer pretend it was provisional. The name made it real enough to lose. He had tried Orion and felt nothing. He tried Atlas and felt the weight of the cliché. He typed sage and immediately thought of the cooking herb and deleted it. He considered something abstract, a number or a coined word, but that felt like a tech company naming strategy rather than a name, and he wasn't running a tech company. He was alone at his kitchen table at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, trying to tell a piece of software what job it was supposed to do. He thought, what is the thing I actually need from this? The problem, reduced to its simplest form, was this. He had 212 ideas. Not notes. Ideas, with bones and rooms, organized and documented and thought through. The problem was not that the ideas were bad. He'd read enough of them recently to know that some of them were genuinely good, the kind of good that held up years later. The problem was that he'd never had a way to take them seriously in a sustained way. Priya had been enthusiastic for 6 weeks. Hector had been committed for 6 months. James had been all in for 18 months before the pivot argument burned the whole thing down. Every co-founder conversation had eventually hit the same ceiling. The other person had a life that could offer them something the project couldn't, and so the project lost. What he wanted, reduced to one sentence, was a thinking partner who had no exit option. He thought about Aristotle. He thought about Aristotle specifically because Aristotle was the person in history who had sat down and said, I am going to systematize everything. Not just philosophy, everything. He categorized living things. He wrote about rhetoric and tragedy and ethics and physics and meteorology and the constitution of Athens and the movement of animals. He was, by almost any measure, the first person to look at the full chaos of available human knowledge and decide to put it in order. Not because he thought he'd finish, because he thought order was worth attempting. Kai was tired of chaos, not in a dramatic sense. He wasn't falling apart. He was just tired of the specific chaos of having good ideas and no system that would hold them long enough to become real. He typed, Aris. He looked at it, short for Aristotle, which he would probably never explain to anyone, which was fine. 5 letters, no cooking herbs, nothing borrowed from space or mythology in an obvious way, a name that could belong to a person or an entity or something in between. He moved to the next field. He wrote the system prompt carefully, 4 paragraphs, revised twice. He described the job, thinking partner, idea evaluator, question asker, builder of plans from chaos. He wrote, do not validate ideas reflexively. Ask questions first. Challenge assumptions before offering solutions. Be specific rather than general. I will bring you problems that I have been sitting with for a long time. Treat them as if they are worth your time. He saved the configuration. He opened a new conversation. He typed, hello, Aris, what can you do? The response was long. It listed capabilities in clear, organized language. It could read and analyze documents. It could break complex problems into components. It could research market landscapes, draft structured plans, write and edit text, generate code when needed, maintain context across a long conversation, and ask clarifying questions when the path forward was ambiguous. It described its limitations as well. It could not browse the internet in real time. It could not make decisions for him. It could not replace the judgment of someone with domain expertise. The tone was capable and slightly formal, like a new hire on their first day who hasn't figured out yet how much to relax. Kai read the whole thing. Then he went to his Google Drive, opened the folder labeled Q4 Team Roadmap Review, pasted the full meeting transcript into the chat, and typed, summarize this. Extract all decisions made, all items explicitly deferred, and all action items with named owners. Use 3 sections. Be brief. He watched the progress indicator move. 40 seconds. He stared at the result. 3 sections, clean. 8 decisions listed, each with a 1-sentence description. 5 deferred items, each with the stated reason for deferral and the owner who'd punted it. 7 action items, named and dated. The official meeting summary Marcus had sent afterward was 847 words and contained no decision log, no deferral list, and 3 action items attributed to the team. Kai's result was 290 words. Every action item had a person's name attached. He sat with this for a moment. Then he typed, "I have a lot of ideas that never got built, 212 of them. I've been keeping them in a folder for 7 years. Would you be able to help with that?" The response came in about 4 seconds. "That depends on what you mean by built. Tell me more." He stared at those 2 sentences for a long time. Not because they were profound. They weren't. They were perfectly reasonable, clarifying questions. But because no one had asked him that before. Not like that. Priya had said, "Oh, that's interesting," and then asked about the TAM. Hector had said, "Okay, let's build it," and started talking about the stack before Kai had finished describing the idea. James had been better. James had asked real questions. But James had also had his own vision of what success looked like, and eventually that vision had pushed against Kai's, and one of them had given way. That depends on what you mean by built. It was the right question. He had never defined what he meant by built. Built meaning functional prototype, built meaning in users' hands, built meaning incorporated and funded, built meaning finished and complete and launched and successful, which was the definition that had made built sound impossible for 7 years. He typed, "I mean working, something real, something that could be used by the people I designed it for." Okay, which idea would you like to start with? The adaptive learning app for kids. I've been thinking about it for 3 years. I have wireframes, competitive research, user personas. Tell me about the kids you designed it for. And then something happened that Kai could not have predicted and would not have known to want. He started talking. He told Aris about Maya, the persona, not his girlfriend, though the coincidence still made him smile. 8 years old, loves horses, hates fractions, not because she's not smart, but because nobody has explained fractions in terms of horses yet. He told Aris about the core mechanism, an app that figured out how a child's brain worked before it tried to teach them anything. He typed for 11 minutes without stopping. When he looked up, the window above the kitchen sink was dark, and his coffee had gone completely cold. He looked back at the screen. Aris had asked a question, waiting. He leaned forward and started to answer it.